The heat in Elysian Fields, Louisiana, doesn't just press down, it suffocates. It's a wet, heavy blanket woven from humidity and the sweet stench of decay, a permanent miasma rising from the bayou that clings to your skin in the back of your throat. On the night Clara Thorne died, that heat felt like a fever, a sickness in the air. Detective Ben Carter felt it in his bones long before the call came in. He felt it like a premonition, a familiar ghost from a past he tried to keep buried 6 feet deep. He was sitting in his worn armchair, the drone of the window unit a poor defense against the night, when the feeling settled over him, cold and heavy, despite the sweltering dark. It was the same feeling he'd had the night his partner David had taken a bullet meant for him, a feeling of something vital tearing away from the world. The call came just after dawn, a shrill cry that cut through the morning haze. The dispatcher's voice was professional, clipped, but the victim's name hit him like a physical blow. Clara Thorne, the younger sister of his late partner, a gut punch of guilt and grief so profound it stole his breath. He owed it to David to handle this himself. He owed it to Clara, the bright-eyed girl he'd watched grow up, the one who always brought him beignets when she visited the precinct. He owed them both more than he could ever repay. The house was on the edge of the old Creole Quarter, a once grand manor succumbing gracefully to the relentless Louisiana damp, its white paint peeling like sunburnt skin. Clara, a historical restoration specialist with a reputation for meticulous loving work, had been pouring her soul into it for months. As Carter ducked under the police tape, the oppressive heat seemed to congeal, the air growing thick and still, buzzing with an energy that was both ancient and malevolent. Inside, the temperature dropped a good 10 degrees, a damp, cellar-like cold that had nothing to do with air conditioning. The first thing he noticed was the smell, not the metallic tang of blood he was conditioned to expect, but the earthy scent of wet soil, of standing water, and something else. A faint floral perfume, like wilted jasmine, so sweet it was nauseating. The crime scene was in the grand parlor, a room with soaring ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows shrouded in dust motes that danced in the weak morning light. Clara Thorne lay on the floor, not far from the main fireplace, but Carter's eyes were not drawn to the body at first. They were drawn to the wall. The long interior wall beside the fireplace was made of old, dark brick, the kind fired in kilns 2 centuries ago, and it was weeping. From the mortar lines between the bricks, a thick, black, tar-like substance was slowly oozing, running down the wall in glistening, sluggish rivulets. It didn't look like water damage. It looked organic, alive. The weeping stains formed strange patterns on the wall, dark Rorschach tests that seemed to shift and writhe at the edge of his vision, coalescing into faces of agony before dissolving back into meaningless streaks. One of the uniformed officers, a rookie named Miller, reached out a gloved finger to touch it, then recoiled as if shocked. "It's cold, sir," he said, his voice hushed, his young face pale. "Colder than the rest of the room. It feels wrong." Carter forced himself to look at Clara. She lay on her back, her beautiful, intelligent eyes wide open, fixed on the weeping wall. Her expression was not one of pain or terror. It was one of rapt, horrified awe, as if she were witnessing a terrible, beautiful miracle. Her arms were outstretched, her fingers nearly touching the base of the wall, as if in her last moments she had been drawn to it, compelled to make contact, to caress the source of her own demise. Her left hand was clenched into a fist so tight her knuckles were white. A junior detective, a steady-handed woman named Eva Rostova, carefully pried it open. Inside, nestled in her palm, was a small, yellowed, and impossibly delicate piece of antique lace. So fragile it looked like it could crumble to dust at a touch. The coroner's preliminary report was brutally simple. A single, powerful blow to the back of the head. The weapon, a heavy, flat-faced stonemason's hammer, lay nearby, its head stained with blood and a smear of the same black fluid that oozed from the wall. It was one of Clara's own tools, part of a set of antique restoration equipment she treasured. The investigation began, a search for logic in a room that screamed insanity. Carter, a man who believed in evidence and motive, in the tangible evils of greed and jealousy, tried to ignore the weeping wall, the chilling cold, the look in Clara's eyes. He focused on the human element. Who wanted Clara Thorne dead? He interviewed her colleagues, her friends, her estranged ex-boyfriend. The answer was always the same. She was beloved, a talented artist with a gentle soul, no known enemies. Her finances were in order. Her personal life was quiet, dedicated to her work. She was the last person in the world anyone would want to harm. The first lead that felt like anything more than smoke came from a neighbor, an elderly Creole woman named Mrs. Devereaux, who sat on her porch every evening in a rocking chair that had outlived 3 husbands. She hadn't heard a struggle. She hadn't heard a scream, but she had seen something. Around 10 o'clock the previous night, she'd glanced over at the house. The lights in the parlor were on, casting a warm glow, and for just a second, framed in the tall window, she saw a figure standing there. A woman, she said, her voice trembling as she recounted it, her dark eyes wide. She was wearing a dark, old-fashioned dress with white lace at the collar. She was just standing there, her back to the room, watching the street. The neighbor had blinked, thinking it was a shadow, a trick of the old wavy glass. When she looked again, the figure was gone. She'd dismissed it. Now she wasn't so sure. She said the woman looked sad, so sad it made her own heart ache. The forensic report on the black fluid from the wall came back, and it only deepened the mystery. It was an organic compound, rich in proteins and lipids, but its cellular structure was unlike anything the lab had ever seen. The report was filled with technical jargon, but the bottom line was simple. It was of no known terrestrial origin. The sample contained trace elements of human tissue, soil consistent with the local delta, and, most bizarrely, embalming fluid from the late 18th century. The piece of lace from Clara's hand was identified by a textile expert at the New Orleans Museum of Art as Spanish, dating back to the 1790s. Exquisite, priceless, and utterly out of place. Carter's frustration grew into a gnawing beast in his gut. The case was a collection of impossible facts, a puzzle with pieces from different boxes. He turned his attention to anyone who had access to the house. The list was short. Clara was careful. The only person with regular, unsupervised access was a local handyman named Lucas Kane, a quiet, brooding man in his late 30s with haunted eyes and the powerful build of someone who worked with his hands. He had been helping Clara with the heavy restoration work, the structural repairs. When Carter and Rostova questioned him, Lucas was a wreck. He was nervous, sweating profusely in the air-conditioned interview room, his eyes darting constantly towards the door as if expecting something to burst in. He had an alibi, but it was weak. He claimed he was home alone watching TV. There was no one to verify it. Carter noted that Lucas seemed to have an almost worshipful admiration for Clara, speaking of her talent, her kindness, with a painful, desperate intensity, an unrequited love perhaps, a classic tragic motive. Days turned into a week, and Carter felt like he was chasing phantoms. The weeping wall became a fixture in his nightmares. He would see it oozing, the black tears forming Clara's face, her mouth opening in a silent scream. He started spending his evenings at the house, alone, sitting in the dark, hoping the oppressive silence would offer up a secret. He told himself he was looking for missed clues, but he knew he was waiting for something else. One night, sitting in the dark parlor, the air thick and cold, he heard it. A faint sound coming from the wall itself, a soft rhythmic tapping, tap, 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 like a fingernail against brick from the inside, and then a whisper, so faint he thought he was imagining it, a trick of the old house settling, a woman's voice speaking in what sounded like Spanish. Mi amor, my love. The words were not just heard, they were felt, a wave of profound sorrow that washed over him and left him chilled to the bone. The logical part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive for 20 years on the force, screamed at him. It was stress, lack of sleep, grief. But the cop part, the part that ran on instinct honed by years of walking the city's darkest streets, knew something was profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. He was out of his depth. He needed someone who understood the shadows of this city better than he did, someone who read a different kind of evidence. He needed Mama Elodie. Mama Elodie was a voodoo priestess, a living legend in the backstreets of the Treme. Her shop was not a tourist trap filled with plastic skulls. It was a place of genuine power, the air thick with the scent of herbs, incense, and old knowledge. Carter, the ultimate skeptic, the man who believed only in what he could bag and tag, felt like a fool walking into her candle-lit sanctum. He felt like he was betraying his own principles. But he was desperate. He told her everything. The weeping wall, the unnatural cold, the antique lace, the impossible lab report, the whisper. He left nothing out. Mama Elodie listened, her dark, ageless eyes never leaving his face. She didn't seem surprised. When he finished, she nodded slowly, a deep, resonant sound. "You are not hunting a man, detective," she said, her voice a low, melodious hum that seemed to vibrate in the air around them. "You are being haunted by a sorrow so old and so deep it has poisoned the very ground it lies in. The house you speak of, it has a name among my people. We call it La Casa de la Novia que Llora. The House of the Weeping Bride. The story is very old." She told him the legend of Isabella de la Cruz, the beautiful, headstrong daughter of a wealthy Spanish official in the late 1700s. She had fallen in love with a man her father forbade her to see, a handsome Creole builder, a man of talent but no station. They met in secret. They planned to elope to Havana, but another man, a cruel and powerful Spanish captain her father favored, discovered their plan. Mad with jealousy and a sense of entitlement, the captain confronted Isabella in that very house, which her lover was building for them as a surprise. He didn't just kill her, he wanted her to suffer, to be erased. He bricked her up alive inside that very wall, entombing her with her love, her hope, and her despair. The legend says that her sorrow was so great, her tears so bitter, they seeped into the very mortar and bricks, and that her spirit, trapped between worlds, betrayed and alone, now lashes out at any woman who finds happiness in that house, especially a woman who is loved by another. It cannot bear to witness joy, and it uses the jealousy of the living as its weapon. Carter left Mama Elodie's shop feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. It was insane. It was folklore, a ghost story. And yet it fit. It explained everything. The Spanish lace from her wedding trousseau, the cold of the grave, the weeping wall, the feeling of a female presence. It even explained a potential motive for Lucas Kane. If the spirit could use jealousy, if it could whisper poison into a vulnerable ear. He went back to the evidence with new, unwilling eyes. He ordered a new microscopic analysis of the stonemason's hammer. This time, protected under a smear of the strange black fluid, they found it, a partial print, a deep impression from the ridge of a thumb previously missed. It was a perfect match for Lucas Kane. Armed with the warrant, Carter and Rostova confronted Lucas at his small, cluttered apartment above a laundromat. When he saw the warrant, Lucas didn't protest. He didn't rage, he simply collapsed, folding in on himself as if his bones had turned to dust. His confession came out in a torrent of terrified sobs, the story of a man unraveled by a force he couldn't comprehend. He had been in love with Clara, a quiet, hopeless love. The DA would have a confession, a fingerprint, a slam-dunk case, but jailing Lucas Kane felt like jailing the gun instead of the shooter. The true evil was still there, weeping its black tears inside the walls of the House of the Weeping Bride. The law had been served, but justice felt a world away. He went back to Mama Elodie, feeling less like a detective and more like a penitent. "There is only one way," she told him, her face grim. "Her body must be found. Her spirit must be given a name. Her story must be told, and she must be laid to rest in consecrated ground. Her sorrow needs an ending. You cannot kill a ghost, detective, but you can sometimes heal the wound that created it." It took a week of cutting through bureaucratic red tape, of calling in favors he didn't have, but Carter finally got the authorization. With a team from the university's archaeology department, a structural engineer, and with Mama Elodie present to oversee the spiritual side of things, they began the grim task of dismantling the weeping wall, brick by painful, tar-stained brick. As they worked, the house grew colder. The air vibrated with a low hum, a sound of deep, powerful resentment. The black fluid oozed from the remaining bricks faster, the smell of wilted jasmine becoming so overpowering it made their eyes water. The workers grew nervous, their tools slipping in their hands. Finally, behind a section of the brickwork that was darker than the rest, they found it, a hollow space.